my why is to advance humanity, which I know sounds kind of crazy to some people. That matters a lot to me. But my what is to help business owners find their way to their best self. Because I know together we'll change the world, which advances humanity. So my level of alignment is to understand, even at the very bottom of this ladder, if I help you make your first good hire that works, frees you up just a little bit. Then the next one and the next one, after 2 or 3 good hires, you start to have some free time and some free money. And I know you'll go explore yourself like I did. When you find out who you are, you're gonna be an Avenger with me. You wanna go change the world. And so, what I understand all of this is, yes, there's a cool platform and an industry leading assessment and all these other things, but you can buy your time back.
Yeah.
And we're creating freedom is what Team Architects does.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Disruptors. Today we have Steve Richards with the Team Architects and Steve Flynn from Fishers, Indiana, talk about how after processing 50,000 job applicants, you'd be surprised at what most business owners get wrong when it comes to hiring. Now guys, I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The information on the show alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you'll become one. And so guys, if you're getting value, please hit that subscribe button. Share this episode. That way we can all grow together. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. So what was your life like right before you got into real estate?
Wow. You should have sent me the questions ahead of time.
Should have listened to all the episodes
I was in corporate America. I have actually. It's been a while. I was in corporate America and I was in tech. So I got out of college in the late 90s and was fortunate enough to be in the .com craze and the Y2K stuff.
Fortunate, you say?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
All right.
And I don't think, some people talk about getting bit by the entrepreneurial bug. I think we're just that way and we uncover it based on, we get exposed to it and we're like, oh, that resonates with me. And other people are like, man, that's terrible. I would never, you're crazy.
Yeah.
So I was around all these .coms and startups and it was really cool to be on the tech side of that, but also just around venture capital and all those things. So I went through that. I didn't even know there was a recession, because I was just young and dumb coming out of school and got into.
You had no experience to compare it against.
Yeah, I had no idea. Now I look back on it, I'm like, that was a crazy, the .com bust and all these things were going on, but I was just growing through the tech curve and that was cool. And I had a startup that I was involved in. It was actually the first one. It was really cool. It was called Momentum.
Okay.
Like KNOW. Okay. And our tagline was, it's not what you know. And you could see 2 or 3 levels deep of your friends' friends. There was no Facebook then. There was no LinkedIn. This was kind of LinkedIn before LinkedIn. And funny story, Friendster was the main app back then. They were getting like a million people a month. Long.
Yeah.
And we were getting about 500 people, not 500,000. But we got up close to 10,000 members, and classmates.com was our actual business model, was to have 3% paying and everybody else free.
Yeah. And
it was crazy because we were just in Boston together. While I was there, the last time I was in Boston, I spent time there was trying to raise money for that 24 years ago. And I was reminded about sitting at the Fleet Center and having them look at us and say, hey, first of all, who's the 50-year-old, 60-year-old person that knows what they're doing, you dumb kids, who's done this before? Second of all, you're in Indiana and you can't run a tech company there. Yeah. If you're not here, you better be in Austin, or you really should be in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And the big kicker was that literally at this time, 2001, they were like, if you did, and this was right after the World Trade Center stuff too. It was crazy to fly into Boston like a month later. But what was interesting, the guy looked at me and he said, literally, if you didn't know, e-commerce didn't work. Because the .com bust that just happened, he was like, the web is for sharing information, not for e-commerce. It didn't work.
Yeah.
And he's like, this isn't going to work. You're not going to make money. We can't make a $100 million company out of this. And it's, I remember walking out there thinking like, man, he's right. But yeah, so
I was right for that time.
I was on the back end of that. And so I was still in the tech business and consulting, but I was really frustrated. I thought, man, I got to do something. And then just a friend of a friend I played basketball with at the gym was like, hey, my friend and my dad and I have spent $30,000 going to seminars to learn about real estate. I was like, man, I'm looking for something to do because I just got out of this tech startup that's not going to work. And that was where it started.
It's funny you mentioned that it's not that we get a bug, it's that we uncover it. So I remember before I went to graduate school, I was still trying to get a job. with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, which is really not a good idea. Like if you get the reason why I talk to all my brothers out of electrical engineering is because you need a master's degree to do anything like important with that degree. And so I remember looking at options like if I want to build a startup I can sell as an engineer, I need to get a PhD. And so that was the reason, one of the main reasons why I went to go get a PhD. I didn't finish it. But I was looking as like, if I want to build a business I can sell, this is back early 2000s.
Yeah.
Well, I need to get a PhD. So like when you said that, like brought back that thought because I haven't had that thought 20 years.
I know. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I have a business degree,
Mm-hmm.
and literally the only couple classes that I had all the test files because I was in a fraternity that had like all the test files.
Of course.
So the easiest classes to cheat on were accounting and business law. Some of the standard business, those are the only ones I needed.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I didn't learn anything, and everything else I learned didn't matter. All the management philosophy and all that stuff. When they did have a good entrepreneurial program at the school I went to, but I didn't do that. But yeah, even being in corporate America, the only thing that I can say that I learned was a lot of this, what not to do. Right. But I will say this about business, because I think today as we kind of slide, and I'm sure I'll get more into my story about how I became a business owner rather than a hustler, which is a lot of people are trying to do. But what's really interesting is so many people that become an entrepreneur are pushing to say, hey, I don't want corporate. I don't want to be corporate. I don't want to be. But the reality is corporate America, there's stuff like bureaucracy and all these things we don't like. But 75% of it is actually really good.
Right.
Like the structure, the meetings, the goals, like KPIs, performance, P&Ls. That's why you get a check mail due every 2 or EFT due every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Right.
And then you start your company, and then you're like, man, I hope you have a bunch of money, and you're like, I'm gonna buy another house or whatever, and you keep throwing money around. And yeah, it's really interesting. Those things
are all important, but when you work at a corporation, they're not treated as important. I mean, I've sat in multiple meetings. It's like, why the hell am I here? Like, I'm just a grunt at this company. My input is not valuable here. I'm just here to listen to you guys like drone on. I remember I would get in trouble. Maybe trouble is not the right word, but you get the look. Where like they have these pep rallies, right? Like work in an engineering company. I don't need a quarterly pep rally.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, we're having a pep rally, and I don't want to go. So my boss tells me to go. I was like, I don't want to go. So he just gives up. And then like the department manager, like, hey, like we're all having a party. Like why are you not going? I was like, I don't want to go. And then the guy that runs the site is there. It's like, Steve, you're going. I was like, okay, I'm going. But like that was a regular occurrence, and that was such a waste of resources. I can't imagine myself in the company I run today once a quarter. All right, we're going to come in and we're just going to cheer and make everyone feel good, regardless of how everything's been.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So then what was the switch for you then that brought you onto the real estate side? So you play basketball. Great. Right. And then these guys said, hey, we invested $30K in a course. What happened after that?
Yeah. So it's interesting, not knowing anything about real estate investing. And they're like, oh, literally people will give you their house. I'm like, no. And they're like, no, they'll give you the deed. And I'm like, well, do you have to have any money? And they're like, sometimes a little bit. And I'm like, so how much money do we need? And they're like, oh, you don't need your money. We just run an ad in the newspaper. This dates me. Mm-hmm. You just put an ad and saying you're willing to pay 15% for people that want to like lend money, and people will call you. Mm-hmm. And then you put ads in the paper in the landlord section saying, hey, if you have a rental that you can't get rented and you want someone to buy it, like we'll buy it. Mm-hmm. And literally Ron LeGrand was teaching that kind of stuff, who we just saw, by the way. And the reason that resonated with me, because I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and Cash Flow Quadrant. We just saw Kim Kiyosaki. We were just with her too.
Right.
And these things were clicking, and I was like, all right, let's try this. And I got all these 3-ring binders that had CDs to listen to and just pages like printed out and just he's like, here, and he brought all this stuff over to my house. And it's really interesting. But, I had already, like I said, and I really do believe, we come here with a mission and we are somebody, and people say, I want to try to figure out what my purpose is. It's a remembering. I think you spend your life trying to remember things. And sometimes when things come to you, you're like, oh, mm-hmm. yeah. And it just make like an epiphany, right?
Right.
Because you didn't learn it. It's like it was already in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. It just uncovered. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's who I am. Right. I already knew I was an entrepreneur and I was going to do my own thing. And I had this deep path I was going to be on. And everything about structure in corporate America just felt wrong to me. So I don't know that it was real estate that was so sexy for me to dive into it, but it was an opportunity because I just stepped away from by the way, that'd have been horrible.
What's that?
The startup I had and getting VC, selling my soul to a venture capital firm, you know what I mean? And like going down that path, I probably would have moved to San Francisco and who knows what would have happened, right? So I'm so glad that didn't work out.
You would have been a hippie.
Yeah.
You would have turned into a hippie.
I am a hippie. I put a collared shirt on for your people today. You already know this.
All right. So 15%, we'll pay 15%, right? So now you're attracting people with money who want to lend.
Yeah.
And you're targeting landlords who want to get rid of the properties. So right off the bat, there's 3 other people. You start off as a 4-person partnership.
Well, actually, the reason that friend that I knew from the gym asked me because the other 2 guys weren't carrying their weight. So the 2 of us just started it, and all that stuff was cool.
He already shedded that weight. All
that stuff was cool, but just like a good person who gets good information at these masterminds we go to all the time, I went and did something different. So we just borrowed hard money, got realtors, hired outside contractors. We started flipping houses.
So the instructions were pretty clear.
Oh, yeah. You don't need any money. And you can make a bunch of money wholesaling, and you can acquire a lot of wealth. And I'm like, why don't we just borrow money from hard money lenders and buy houses and use realtors?
Let's just do it our way.
Yeah. Yeah, but, on Flip This House on A&E made it look so easy at the time. Easy. So, yeah, we started doing that. And I would say for the first several months, we'd go out on Saturdays and look at 20 houses and make offers and not get any of them. And then I met some guys that did wholesaling, and that kind of opened up the door. And it's like, where do you get all these deals? And they're like, oh, we do marketing. These aren't on the market. And my mind got blown open. And so within 6 months, we had 5 renovation projects going at a time, and we just never looked back. And within 9 to 12 months, we had 12 rentals, and some were duplexes, and we'd had several houses going, and I quit my day job.
Where was this?
Mm-hmm. In Indy, Central Indiana. I've done 1,500 deals, and they've all been in Central Indiana.
Gotcha. Okay. So smooth sailing right off the bat. Yeah.
I didn't know any better. I felt like things were well, but you just don't know because I didn't understand the idea of KPIs back then. And so it's like you just roll with the punches. Mm-hmm. You just roll with it. You're literally flying with no instruments. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it seems okay, but it's like when you get done with the flip, if I would have had all the receipts, because I didn't have all of them, but if I would have added it up, I would have found out how little I actually made. But I'm like, all right, go on to the next one. And honestly, it was more of an education time for me, and money was flying. But we would make $10,000 to $20,000 every time we bought a rental because we would just finance it. Because back then, this time was in 2004, going in 2005, that first year where I was fully in, I could borrow 10 to 20% more than I was buying the house for. Mm-hmm. Not 120%, but we could go buy it 70 cents on the dollar and get a 90% loan and take the different cash out on purchase. And so I'm like, hey, let's call it $15,000 every time we buy a house. I'm not really that worried about the contractor running over on the rehabs, right? It was just really loose. And we learned a lot back then, but yeah, it was definitely not till later when I started really tracking everything that I learned how bad it was.
So a little bit of bank balance management. Is there money in the bank account? Yes or no? Right. But you also, it sounds like you figured out that if we just buy these properties, we're actually a very profitable company. We just buy the properties and just refi out of them.
Yeah, for sure. And then we
were doing the birthing way, way back.
Yeah, and then we learned the lesson of property management. Because you do, wealth-wise, you get that, but cash flow-wise, you can get chewed up, right, if you don't have good management.
Yeah, what was that lesson? Or how did you learn that lesson?
Yeah, not to manage properties yourself. Which again was an interesting thing, and you and I have been around so many masterminds and coaching, and I coach a lot of people now, and I ran a REIA in our city for quite a while, for 7 years. I've been around so many people that fall into this happenstance. They become a turnkey person, or they just manage their own rentals because they say things like, "I don't trust anyone else to take care of it the way that I would." No, you're being cheap. You don't want to pay the 10%, but if you have the right property manager, they will always have a return on that 10%. Will always be there. Especially if you're new to the business. For you to think that you can manage a property, maybe 1 or 2, right? And if it's not in the hood, but as soon as you have, 15, 20 properties and you think you have enough going on that it's like, seems like real money you're spending. That was a big lesson. And I don't regret any, I never regret anything because everything's a lesson to me. But I can remember a very pivotal point where I made the decision to pull back from all the people helping us in management because we had 40 rentals. And I'm like, we have enough now to do this ourselves. And I brought it in-house, which quickly within a year or two, we were wholesaling and doing other things. This was around 2008. And it was interesting because as soon as people heard that, they're like, oh, will you manage mine too? And I'm like, that's perfect. Economy of scale.
All right.
And what's even worse is that you don't know how bad you are at management, but you don't beat yourself up for not getting your reports done on time. And you don't ever ask yourself, well, where's that deposit being held? Do you really have a trust account with a brokerage? And are you licensed? And like all these things don't happen until you start managing at a high level. And we eventually started managing hundreds of properties for other people. And then it became really real. And yeah, that was a several year lesson for us. In how
You get in trouble for that?
No.
That's good.
Well, I mean, trouble, not legal trouble.
Well, I asked that because there are way more property managers than really should ever happen in the Phoenix market where, oh, 100,000 disappeared. Oh, $300,000 missing, right?
Yeah.
The commingling of funds, because commingling in the Arizona Department of Real Estate is the one thing they don't mess around with. That's prison. Pretty quick.
Wow.
Right? So that's why I asked, do you get any kind of trouble? Because when you're managing on your own, I don't think that people are nefarious. I think they're just lousy at management. And very quickly, you don't know. It's like, oh, crap, I'm in $300,000 hole. Because I remember the guys that got busted, they were in the suite above us, I believe, in Tempe. And never see the guy driving a nice car. He was never flashy. It was just one day, oh, well, I guess he's going to prison.
Wow.
For commingling. And it was like, I can't remember if it was 150 or 300,000, but he lost it.
Yeah.
Right. So, and those are people's security deposits and so on.
Yeah. At scale, I mean, just even having the wrong insurance and some kind of big storm comes through and then you go out to do 50 roofs, or when in Indiana where bad weather hits, there would be time in the winter where we would have, HVAC calls for heat. We might have 80 calls in one night.
Yeah.
And we're buying 50 furnaces and we're scrambling and everybody bills you 30 days later. It's like, yeah, just get it done. And then all of a sudden you're trying to reconcile you are actually nailing it, that it's almost never nefarious in this business, at least in the wholesaling. And there's a lot turnkey. I've seen a lot of bad stuff and I've seen people knowingly taking money from people.
Right.
But on the property management side, it's usually a realtor or a contractor or a wholesaler who was trying to do their thing, who was like, oh, I can do more of my thing if I help with other parts of the business.
Right.
So it's almost like a facilitator to, for me, I wanted to wholesale. Ironically, I didn't know how to create a sales team or hire the right people.
Right.
So people are like, no one's buying the properties as quickly as I wanted. And they're like, hey, you do a lot of rehabs for yourself. Can you just rehab them? I'm like, yeah. And then they're like, you manage for yourself. Can you also fix them up? And then it became so much easier to sell if I just said, okay, it's renovated, rented, and I'm managing it. Buy mailbox money.
Right.
Right. And all of that happened for me because I did not understand how to build a sales team. All I ever wanted to do back then was wholesale. I wanted to build my own portfolio and generate a nice income off of flipping wholesale properties.
Right.
And one thing led to another, and it's a slippery slope. And one day you wake up and we're managing 350 homes, not units, actual different houses all over the city.
Yeah.
We have 100 clients around the world, many in Israel, California, and Hawaii, where a lot of our business came from. We had 13 different property management agreements. And we had 2 different softwares we were running because one of the REITs we work for made us use a different software.
Oh.
The complexity of trying to keep all that straight was just...
Yeah.
But we never knowingly made a decision to allow that stuff. It's like you're just grabbing as you run, and you think you'll figure it out later, but you're just literally sealing yourself.
There's a term in software, they call it technical debt, which is basically yeah, it's okay for now. Okay, this is okay for now. Okay, we can do this for now. And it is a day of reckoning. Because every time you do it, it's like, yes, it's okay for now. But that's just more you got to tear down and unwind to do it right. And so it sounds like you kind of went into this thing. It's like, okay, all right, now we need to do this right. Did you have that?
I did. And actually, I'm going to put a pin in that real quick and come back to it because I think this would be interesting for everybody listening. It's something that I've become more aware of I'm going to be 50 in a couple months, in my old age, in my boomer age, in 20, whatever years later. The problem with what you just said is, have you ever heard the concept of a complicated system versus a complex system?
You've explained it to me before, but I cannot do it justice.
Yeah. So just quickly, I can't remember. I didn't remember if we talked about that, but a complicated system is like an airplane or a computer. Like a part breaks, you just change the part. You can just change the RAM in your computer. Everything else works fine.
As long as it's not a Mac.
Exactly. I should have said PC.
Yeah.
Good point, though. Or a plane. A sensor goes bad, and they're like, hey, we're waiting because we got to change a sensor, and they check all that stuff, and you just change it in and out, and it can be...
It's plug and play.
Yeah, largely can just be fixed, and it doesn't affect anything else. The problem with business and humans, and many people will say the problem with business is that humans are involved, but it's both. Complicated systems, each part affects the other part. So like you could have a mood issue because your gut biome was off because you took you had a infection you couldn't get rid of, right? And you took an antibiotic 3 months ago and you don't know why you're feeling like sluggish right now.
Right.
Has nothing to do with your mood, right? I mean, you're feeling that, but it's because of your gut biome, which was actually because you had an ear infection, 3 months ago. And to your point, every time in business when you say something like, I'll fix this later, or or worse yet, you just are negligent and don't get KPIs in place, so you just don't even. Most people don't have KPIs because they don't want to see how bad it is.
Right.
But until you can lock in on it, you can't understand it. But every time you don't know what's going on over here, but you know there's a problem, it's actually affecting everything else.
Yeah.
Just like your marriage would affect your business, or your health affects your marriage, or whatever. But I wanted to add that part because it was a huge lesson for me, whether I'm in business or I'm a real estate investor, no matter what I'm doing, but to start to understand how the whole picture matters, right? And like you said in that software example of like, it's okay for now. So if I gain a little weight or what, it's okay for now, but now I'm not sleeping right. My blood work is off, you know what I mean? And then I'm sluggish at work and I'm in a bad mood and then I'm treating people bad and somebody quits. And then money gets tight at work. And now my wife's freaked out because she doesn't feel safe because I told her, hey, we're going to be tight on money for a minute because I got to get somebody hired. That stuff is so interconnected. But all right. Well,
and then just to finalize the part about complicated versus complex. Did you explain what complicated is? You haven't explained.
Oh, sorry. I didn't. So complicated is the plane and the computer where the parts don't affect each other.
Right. Interchangeable.
Yeah. Complex is what I just got done explaining, where humans are complex, business is complex. And the key word, if you guys are trying to remember this, is unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So you don't understand that, like, hey, I'm going to swap something out over here and how it affects something over here, unless you have KPIs. So you can say, hey, wow, that's weird. I changed this and this changed.
Right.
Because I'm tracking all of it.
Yeah. So you couldn't, for example, if your wife was upset because your money is tight because you treat somebody bad, you couldn't just magically just replace that employee and then everything is fine.
Yeah.
No, it's all interconnected. So your day, did you have a day of reckoning?
Yeah. So kind of. I was at Infusionsoft conference, InfusionCon in 2013.
Yeah.
And I met a gal there who was talking to me about business. She's like, what do you do? And I'm like, in real estate. She says, I'm in real estate, the retail side. And she's like, my mom and I, they own like 25 Keller Williams franchises around the country. And they have 100 agents minimum because they don't go live until they have 100 agents committed because that's where they start to make money. And I was like, wait, you have I'm trying to figure out how to run property management I have like 4-part business that's not set up correctly, but I'm in one city with just 4 different businesses, but they're all related and connected. And she's like, yeah, we have 25 completely separate offices in different cities all over the country. And she lived in a city where there wasn't even one of the offices. She lived in Denver. Their stuff was in Washington and California and Texas. And I'm like, how do you do? She's like, I get reports every day. I look at the activity reports and I look at the P&L and I can just see things. And I was like, man, that's crazy. She said, there's a book that just came out. I've been real interested because it's like the first time I've heard anyone else who wrote a book the way that I think. She showed me something it was traction that she had from it. And then she got my address before we went home. And by the time I got home, she had shipped me a book, a copy of it. So this was in March 2013, I believe. And I read Traction. I read it all. I listened to it, read it, went all the way through it like 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, all right, my management team has to get on this. And the reckoning wasn't a day, but what was interesting is we started meeting weekly to self-implement. I wouldn't even have known what a certified implementer was back then, 11 years ago. We literally couldn't get out of chapter 1, core values, because they kept wanting to have these core values for all of our turnkey clients and all these different business divisions. And I'm like, those are dumb. I don't like any of them. They're like, what do you want? And I'm like, I believe in this and I stand for this and I'm against this. And they're like, no one's going to care about that. And I remember flippantly saying one day, well, it just seems like I shouldn't be in any of these businesses because we can't agree. We can't even get past chapter 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then within a few months, that's what happened. I went and took stock. And you know what's interesting? I'll say this too. This is why masterminds and coaching is so powerful, because you don't know what you don't know. So while my mind is getting blown with this book of like what I need to do to make this all work right, we took on a big REIT client because that was when REITs were really, prevalent. And we helped Progress Residential, if you know them from Phoenix, come into our market. We were very involved. We built their pricing model and their renovation. We did a lot of their agency work. I was heavily involved, and they flew me out here to Scottsdale to meet with them. And so I got very on the inside of a $1.2 billion fund that had bought 14,000 houses in 9 states in 4 years. And I would go to their office. They had like 30 people working there. They were all MBAs. And they all had people working for them. And they had property managers that reported to MBAs who all managed the property managers. I was like, wait, you hired a property manager, but you have a manager to manage the manager? And everybody's got an MBA here? And I just was like, man, and the way they ran their meetings, we would go into meetings and sit for 2 hours and hope to get something done. It was an hour meeting, it lasted 2 hours, and sounds like your corporate experience.
Yes.
I ran my business like what I saw from the business world.
Yeah.
We had meetings with them. They were using smart sheets, like an online everything. If we had a 12 o'clock meeting on Tuesday, by 12 on Monday, you were required to update everything ahead of time. And when we got on, everyone was supposed to have already looked at it. Our meetings were 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was only for exceptions. If it's on track, you don't talk about it. And if it's off track, you already have the solution based on the guidelines you agreed to work with them. And you just get down, okay, on track, off track, what are we doing? Let's talk about what are we doing? Plan 1 and 2 is this. Okay, do plan 2. Make plan 1 the backup and do this for 2 weeks and then prepare that if this doesn't work and make a little tweak. Okay, next. We could talk about 60 vacancies in like 11 minutes. And it was crazy. And so that was the other part of the reckoning that you asked about, was I got to see how a world-class organization ran. And I'm looking at how I'm running this company. And when I took a step back, this is where a lot of things started happening for me. We have a lot of deep conversations that we may not get into today about all the ayahuasca and all the cool stuff. But I personally took stock and I'm like, wait, I built a business that all my clients wanted and that I thought was cool because of like all these guys I follow and work with. It's not what I want. So the end of that slow 6-month reckoning was me realizing I was way out of alignment with like who I am and what I wanted to do. And so, that was the biggest. Yeah, that was the day I decided to start blowing that up, and that was in 2014.
So did you give it back to your partner?
We closed certain parts, closed the brokerage, and I just referred people out for property management, and I had a 6-month beautiful exit planned, and it turned into like 6 days. As soon as our clients were like, what? We thought you were going to manage our assets we invested in you, not the property, and it got ugly for a while, but
Ugly how?
Just because of the dysfunction that we had. So like 50 of the properties out of the 350 we were managing were joint ventures, and so like we had equitable interest in them, and we had agreements where we would guarantee a certain amount of rent. Say the rent was $800, but we would guarantee like $350 because we had a buffer for management, for reserve. Like, we would meet with these clients and be like, yeah, at a minimum, we can average this. We blended in vacancy, but they're like, we need more. We don't want to get paid on this one, not on this one. We want to hold you accountable. And I understand why they did it now, because they protected themselves. But then, so we had so many agreements to unwind that it was really hard, because it wasn't just like, oh, we're not going to manage your property anymore. I mean, it was almost like we were basically joint venture partners with half of our clients, and our businesses weren't running on separate employees and separate books. And it was really hard to say, hey, we're getting out of this, but not out of this, because it was so intertwined.
The whole complex part.
Yeah. And it was just, it took me 10 years. It took me 9 years to hit a 7-figure business the first time. And in year 10, I had to unwind that in like 6 months. But it took me 10 years to like intricately make everything the wrong way.
Right.
And so then it was like, just trying to like untie a huge knot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like trying to pull pieces out, and that's why it was so hard.
So what'd you do after that?
So it was like a early midlife crisis, and I spent money with anyone that would help me figure out who I am. Mm-hmm. I literally had a nutritionist, a physical therapist, I had a counselor, I had a life coach, I had an Enneagram coach. I was going to guitar lessons with my daughter, and I'm taking my son to golf lessons. I'm doing it with them, and I had a trainer in the gym, and I had gotten to, I stay around 200 pounds now. I'm the strongest I've ever been. I'm in the best shape I've ever been, but I got up to 245, and I was like 35% body fat, and I was asleep at the wheel. And I got on peptides, and I got in the gym, and I'm going to therapy. I'm learning about wounding and like, childhood wounds and triggering and all these things. And I dug in, and I sold most of that year. I made money by just selling off some houses I owned free and clear, like nicer houses, and I finished some projects. But largely from the end of 2014 into the end to the fourth quarter, or through the third quarter of 2015, I was just trying to find myself.
Yeah. So you were able to, like you were saying, with the assets, to go on this journey, figure yourself. Now a lot of people
it was
have
hard.
That.
It was hard.
The opportunity, like, all right, I'm going to take some time to really learn about myself, because we always have to like either pay some bills or deal with other fires or whatever.
I had all that too, though.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. On the audience, I don't know how well everybody relates to this. Mm-hmm. But when you're entrepreneurial and you uncover that, and you get the right, I'm not going to say coaching, but you get the right tutelage, which I had from being in some different groups and being around some really great people, you are an ATM. You can go punch your code. It's an unlimited ATM. And I mean, I faced some pretty crazy things at that time, but I also had a lead that I wasn't going to touch with a 10-foot pole. That was a hard money lender out of North Carolina that had loaned money to a guy I know. And they had 50 houses in Indiana, and they were like, it's a one-off deal. We should have never done it. Please. Dude, I'm like, package deals are such a colossal waste of time usually. And it's 50 houses. We don't have keys to any of them. I think 13 are rented. We don't know. We just need any. Will you please help? They were asking me. I'm like, no, just stay away for it. And then at one of the toughest points during that year, when we were financially hit hard and blowing money, just 6 figures going out at a time to like clean things up and do things, I literally spent 4 months. I went to 50 houses by myself. I created 50 renovation budgets. I met with 13 tenants. I signed 13 leases. I got 50 comps. I got 50 assessed values. I created tax records I put a whole matrix together. I put the whole portfolio together. I would not have done that if I didn't have the skills I had. And of course I had, and they were a call on our 800 number off of our website. And I blew it off for like a few months. And then I called them back. I'm like, you still got those properties? They're like, yes, please. And it was with when I needed it the most, my back was against the wall, I was able to sell those. And I sold 37 of them for roughly what I was paying for all 50.
Okay.
20 grand more. Mm-hmm. So there's only 20 grand to make selling 37 properties. Mm-hmm. But I did 2 things. I mean, obviously I kept 13 properties.
Right.
So people kept looking at the whole portfolio, offer me what I had it for contract, which happens all the time, right?
Right.
It's weird because the seller knows what it's worth, the buyer knows, and they're both offering the same. Happens all the time. You get squeezed out as a wholesaler.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, tell me the problem. And I really got deep with everybody. And I knew construction better than anyone that was trying to buy this package out because I'd renovated at that time. I'd already done 800 or 700 of the 1,500 deals I had done. And so I would sit down with everybody and I realized like 9 of the 13 properties are a pain. And 4 of them are in regentrifying areas and they don't know what they are because they're valuing them so low. And they were small pockets where Fed money was going into. So they were income restricted sales. So there was brand new homes selling for really, really cheap. And I knew that if you came in with a market rate house, because those were income restricted buyers, so they couldn't sell it, but they were brand new homes that probably cost $200 to build and they were selling for $100,000.
Right.
So the comps didn't look that great, but I knew if I came in with a renovated home, I could sell for $175, not $200. So I was able to find 4 that I knew had a lot of value that were just under the radar. And the other 9, they were just throw-ins. They were screwing the deal up.
Yeah.
And they were worth $5,000. So that's another $45,000, which is a good amount of money to just for 9 turds. So, it's funny. I know we're going to talk about team architects today, but and hiring and all these things. But this was an interesting time for me to really start to understand the business and the roles we all play and how, you know what I mean? And I actually put my hat on and I did the project management role. I did the salesman role. I did the dispo role. And I went and I had to do all of it for the first time in many years because my team was gone.
Right.
But anyway, to finish that, I was able to do a couple of things which I think are just cool. One is sell that portfolio so there was a chunk of money at the end, small chunk. Then have these other 4 houses I was able to renovate a couple and wholesale a couple. Then have these 9 houses that we dumped. But the other thing was I got prorated taxes on 50 properties from the seller and I did not pass that through to the buyer. I signed a deal for no prorated taxes. And so that was an extra almost $20,000 at closing,
Right.
which just kept the prorations. But you're right. But I don't want anyone to think that I was my business sucked, but I just dipped into my portfolio of $100 million of assets and sold a couple things off. My back was against the wall, and that's when we do some of our best work.
Absolutely. I heard recently, we don't learn from successes, we only learn from failures.
I heard that too.
Yeah, or adversity. So then when did team architects come around?
Yeah, so 2015, I really came back with, and this time I was like, look, I'm going to wholesale, and I'm not going to fall into this. I'm just really going to wholesale. And so
We're going to focus this time.
Yeah, well, I'm going to, when things don't work, I'm going to use it as a learning lesson instead of a sign to move on to something else, which is what you just said. And I learned from all those different things in the past. And so I decided then I needed to build a better team because that's what was when I was looking at Progress Residential over here at my old business, when I got to see how a world-class organization ran, that was the big difference is they had very legitimate people who could really handle what they were supposed to handle, but they all knew exactly what they were supposed to do, right? And they all had their own jobs. They stayed in their lanes. And so I set that out in 2015. And so within a year and a half, I largely removed myself out of the day-to-day. Within a couple of years, I've basically been out of the day-to-day. By 2017, going in 2018, I was more in the management of it. And by 2018, 3 years in, it took me 9 years at 7 figures the first time. And then at that point in time, we were well into the 7 figures in deals we'd done. And I was largely not having to be at the office. So that was cool. And I started, coaching more. And I'd been in consulting when I got out of college back in 98, 99, 2000. So it's funny how I look through these threads. We can connect these dots like Steve Jobs style, looking backwards. I ran a REIA for 7 years in between there, and I'm coaching everyone. I just wasn't charging for it. A lot of people in Indy know me, and I spent a lot of time doing that. And I just that really played into understanding people too, right? And so a lot of people hire people and look at them as almost a necessary evil to have employees, but learning how to coach is important for your team, even if you're not an outside paid coach. But you need to coach your team. And so when we got into, by 2018, 2019, I learned one of the biggest moves was we went from disc for a really hot minute to predictive index.
Yeah.
Which I know you like.
Yep.
And it was game changing for us. But I had to cobble together the cognition, a little more integrated with PI now. And I also didn't have a good avatar, so I would look at it and I'd be like, oh, this is so helpful, but it's a backwards Z. Mm-hmm. Well, I need a skinny Z, not a wide. This guy's a wide Z. And like interpretation was still a little bit, but it changed the game for us. Like literally changed the game to not just use personality, but also cognition traits. Mm-hmm. And then we started learning other lessons about managing and KPIs, and I became like it's my love language. I know it's kind of weird, but I see zeros and ones everywhere.
It's fascinating once you understand this stuff, because like I remember like at my first brokerage, there was this guy who seemed pretty smart, right? Seemed pretty smart. Mm-hmm. And it was very philosophical, studies philosophy for fun. But like he seemed really intelligent. But he would just lose his shit at like the most random thing. And I couldn't understand it. It's like, doesn't he understand that every time he flies off the handle, he's losing business, right? Like you can't lead an organization if you're unstable. Letting your team know that you're smarter than them definitely isn't inspiring. And then like, I get it. I have a different relationship with realtors. You know, I look at us, we're all God's special children, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, the way he would treat these realtors, like he's literally capping his income potential because of how he treats other people. And I was like, this guy's so smart. Like, why doesn't he get it? And now I know, right? Through understanding personalities, how we're wired, how we show up. Like, some people are just quicker to anger. Some people just snap. So, empathy or EQ isn't for everybody.
100%. And it's interesting because if you're put the wrong butt in the wrong seat, it'll magnify any personality conflicts that you already have.
Yeah.
Because you're also, and then there's all these other things that come into play. Like, are you a core values match or a culture match in the office? So you could be a good fit personality wise, but if you're not a culture match, there's abrasive like friction there. Right. And so it almost eliminates the personality traits you have in your favor because you're rubbing everybody the wrong way on the intangibles. Or the tangibles might be, you got a great personality set of traits, but you've never done this before. You're in a new job, you don't know what you're doing, versus someone who's not really, their brain isn't really lined up to be good at it, but they've been doing it for 15 years.
Yeah.
If I need production tomorrow, I'm hiring the person who has 15 years of doing it, even though their ceiling is much lower.
Right.
They don't have as much potential, but their basement is a lot higher just because they know the vernacular and they've seen the ball go through the hoop and they're willing to show up and do it. So we learned some interesting stuff because we overcorrected. When I learned about personality tests, we went to like, cool, ram everybody that applies through this, and whoever scores well, hire the first one. And we would get terrible culture matches. And we're like, we got to put culture in. And then later we're like, okay, they're a perfect culture fit and they're a perfect personality fit, and cognition became so important. We can talk about that in a minute. But then we learned about skills and experience. You just can't, you can go with just this piece of culture fit and personality and cognition, but you have to be willing to train them. And if you're not good at training,
managing, world-class training.
Yeah, it's not going to work. And so if you're not good at managing and training, you need to hire someone that's already gone through that at another job. So much to take into consideration, but this is what's at stake is that, do you remember, I don't remember the guy's name. I was just using this analogy at one of the events you and I were together. Remember the guy on Andy Griffith who's like the town drunk?
I don't remember the guy's name, but yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And he lets himself into the jail.
Yeah.
He just comes in, he pulls it shut, he reaches out, grabs a key, he locks it, he hangs the key up, and then he lays it down and goes to bed. That jail is the business that most people create. Literally lock themselves into that, right? And we all set out to be free, and it's almost anything but that is what happens. But we feel better because we're imprisoned in our own terms. Right. Feels better. But the reality is...
Yeah, we are our own worst boss, but at least we're the boss.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm not saying one's better than the other, but the reality is the very freedom we want in a business requires scale, not growth. scale. Well, they're related to each other, but they're different. And so many people who are like in their first couple of years are like, I'm scaling my business. And I'm like, no, you're scaling a pile of crap. Like literally, if you scale what you have, that's not not optimized and innovated, and you're going to, this little nick that's bothering you right now is going to turn into a gaping gash bleeding you out later. And so you can scale without being organized, but you just scale all your problems, right? And you don't know how big your problems are when you're doing a small volume of business. And so we just learned that the only way to become free is to have a team, is for leverage. And the only way to have a team that you can trust and get away from is to hire the right people. And I know we're going to get more into this, but I'll just add, I feel it's a good time to add this, is that most entrepreneurs are really bad at managing and training. But think about this. If you hire someone who's already got the skill set and their brain power is already designed to be good at this job, and they're a culture fit, and you kind of halfway train them, they're going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what I did in my last job. And then when you send them out to do it, your management is like high-fiving them for doing a good, because they're kind of good at it.
Right.
So it's like all these things cascade like dominoes. Like if we start with the wrong hire, everything else is harder.
Yeah. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah.
So, but before we continue, so you mentioned, like the baseline, the experience, right? So I was consulting. So I have one person I do one-on-one coaching. Like, I've never done one-on-one coaching. This guy's like, demands it. It's like, okay, like we'll work this out. So his team has, they're interviewing somebody, and this person's door-to-door sales, pest control for the last 4 years, successful doing pest control and pest control sales, right? And they're like, we're not, his profile doesn't look good. Yeah. It doesn't look good, but his results have been there. So then I asked him, like, well, how's the culture fit? How's the core values? Like, he's a good fit. So then what do we know here? You've got a solid baseline. He's not going to the All-Star game.
Yep.
But he's going to be steady Eddie. So all we're looking for here, if the guys did door-to-door sales successfully for 4 years, let's just look for red flags for reasons not to hire him. Yep. And that's it. Let's not like disqualify him because he doesn't have great potential, because the guy is going to perform. He's going to get you results month in, month out. He just may never be an all-star.
I'm filming this video for the man himself, Mr. Ian Ross. The guy crushes. The guy's the best person in sales I've ever seen. I've invested elsewhere and I haven't got the same results. I've gone from being a seller, making 5K a month, to being a hybrid role, making 11K a month, to now be 4 months down the line from 5K to on a closing opportunity, inbound, full calendar, with the best opportunity, the best offer in my space. OTE is around 20K a month from month 2. So I've gone from 5K to 20K. If that's not a return on your investment, I don't know what is, man. If you're a salesperson and you don't invest in sales training, you're gonna get left behind, because your job is to be better at sales. And sales training directly makes you more money.
My name is Lance McCann. I have recently switched sessions with Ian Ross. Those conversations with Ian has made me $50,000 in the past 2 deals that I've had. I was able to go back and renegotiate the original purchase price on one deal, and I saved $40,000, and I got another $10,000 off my other deals. Call Ian, give him a chance. You won't regret it.
If you like what you just heard and you'd like to have similar types of results, similar success, text CLOSE, CLOSE, to 33777, and we'll see if you qualify to join Advanced Sales Mastery. We are taking people from good
He just may never be an all-star.
100%. I completely agree. So it's like what you just said kind of summed up is, in the middle, we're looking at personality and cognition traits and things like that don't largely change.
Who you are, unless there's a traumatic effect, like it's who you are.
Or it slowly shifts over time.
Yeah.
All the way over here, we have these tangible things, which are the skills and experiences. It's your resume. These are tangible assets that you have.
Your track record.
Yep. And over here on the other end, we have intangibles, which are your work ethic, your desire, how interested you are in the industry, core values. So largely, a really good leader can affect this. You can motivate someone.
For everyone who's listening, the intangibles.
The intangibles can be kept thinking of YouTube. The intangibles can be affected by great leadership. And the tangibles can be affected by good management and training. This can't be changed. Right. And this sets in the middle, the personality and cognition, it sets the bar for how high or how low things can be.
Right.
So this gauges the potential of where we're going to be. And then these two, largely on the tangibles and intangibles, are is how it plays out is going to be based on these. But I can't go to battle without two of the three.
Yeah.
I would like to have all three.
Perfect. Ideal. All three.
But if I don't have two of the three, I stack the deck against myself,
Mm-hmm.
and it's likely not to work.
Right. So intangibles, which is culture, core values. Tangibles, which can be learned, or as a skill that can be developed, and then who you are, and you are who you are.
Yep.
Which it could drift over time, but for the most part, if they took the test today, they're going to show up the same way in about a year, approximately.
Yep. And that stuff, I like to say it's just how your brain works, how you're wired. The way you're wired is kind of the thing we talked about being in the middle. And I would add to the intangibles that it's not just core values. It's also your work ethic and your motivation, which wanes more. Core values tend to stay for periods of time because they're more instilled in you. But your motivation, inspiration, right, and your work ethic can actually fluctuate a lot more just based on how your personal life's going.
Yeah.
Right? You can have really good core value matches, but if you're just super tired because you're like have a new baby at home and your employee's like tired when they come in, their work ethic might slack. Right? And so that's all in the intangible bucket.
Gotcha. And then I took this test for I think executive assistant. How did I do? Would you hire me for executive assistant?
You failed. We don't say pass fail, but you can take the assessment. Our team architects, we call it the TA12 because it's 12 traits. But you take it once and then we apply those to any role. We happen to do a few for you. Some scored really well. By the way, if we need Steve's ego to get boosted, we can show you how well he scored for sales manager, CEO, all those kinds of things. But yeah, for administrative assistant, I think you remember, is it 11 or 13?
I can't remember if it was like a 4 or a 7.
It was bad.
Yeah.
On a 100-point system. And so anything under 80, 70 is like where we're looking to baseline or above. And and you were like around single digits.
Yeah.
So you should not be anything administrative should not be in your lap.
Yeah. If we want something, if we want the I's dotted and the T's crossed, I can do it like until lunch on my first day.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about as far as I can go.
Well, that's a good point. I'll make a quick note on that because some people will use our assessment and they'll literally say, hey, I've got this guy that's been doing this job really well for 5 years. And he takes our assessment and it says he's a 10. And they're like, I don't trust the assessment anymore. The reality is we just talked about how complicated this system is, right? The intangibles, tangibles. And one thing that we look at is we've done a lot of research around this. There is no one has taken the TA12 and given it to everyone in America. So I don't have the actual results for this, but I largely believe if every working adult in the country took this, at least 50% of them would score well below the mark where we wouldn't even interview them for the job they're in.
Yeah.
Not only because they just randomly got into a job, but even if they started in a job or career where they were a good fit, if you understand the Peter principle, where people get promoted until at some point they're no longer good at what they do, they don't get demoted back to where they were good. They change jobs and now their resume says they're at this level, so they stay at this level. And so the reality is, I would say that most people, this is two interesting things if anybody takes this assessment, because I think we're going to give them a way to do that here today. But if you don't score well, you're normal, right? Because it's normal for people to have a job they don't like or not good at naturally.
I think that's corporate America.
But they can still get work done.
Right.
But they're going against the grain and it wears you out when you go home.
It pays the bills. Those are the things you say. Right? If you're working a job that you don't love, right? You do it, you're competent, you're not rewarded, you're not waking up, jumping out of bed to go do this work. It pays the bills. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of honor. Like you got to take care of your family. You got to take care of your kids. You got to do what you got to do, right? So like there's nothing wrong with that. We're just merely suggesting that the likelihood that you're sitting in a job that you absolutely love
And you're good at it.
that you're excellent at, not above 50%.
It's probably way lower than that. And I would suggest if you guys are trying to understand what we're talking about here, like in the hot seat rooms at one of the masterminds we were just at, I can go all day.
Yeah.
I don't need a pee
We're talking
break.
about the boardroom.
Yeah, the boardroom. I don't need a pee break. I don't need water. I'm in a room with 7 and 8 figure earners who have real problems, and I'm coaching them.
Yeah.
I'm getting energy from that because that's exactly who I am, and it's in perfect alignment with me. And when you're out of alignment, which is what we're talking about, where your traits aren't a great match, which is most of America and the job they're in, it's when it drains you and you limp into Friday and you barely recharge on the weekend, and then you have a black cloud on Monday where it saps the life out of you because you're going against your natural tendency.
You're looking at the clock at work.
So yeah, it's tick.
Yeah.
Tick.
Going to happy hour. But yeah, like for me, I can sit in a hot seat room all day, every day. I love it because it fulfills for me 2 desires. A, help somebody. I took Working Genius recently, right? There's 2 things that I'm good at, according to Working Genius. Patrick Lencioni, this is not my words, right? Invention. You give me some crazy situation here, I can tell you exactly how to solve it, right?
Yeah.
That is just pulled out of thin air. Another one is discernment. I could tell you why what you just said is a stupid idea very quickly. So those are the 2 things. The reason why I've been asked to leave masterminds, right? And so when I sit in,
sounds like a sore subject there.
it's a funny subject, but when I can sit in a hot seat all day because I get to do the 2 things I love the most, right? A few things, right? I get to learn, I get to help somebody, and I get to coach them out of a bad situation before they get into that situation. This fills my cup all day, every day. But if I had to organize the event, if I had to call people, it's like, hey, did you get checked in? Did you get your badges?
Yeah.
Right? Hey, we noticed you haven't filled out the form. What's going on? Oh my God. I would lose my mind.
Yeah, 100%. Now take that and apply it to your business and say, hey, if I have to hire an acquisition agent who dreads calling people.
Has to look at the phone before I hit the call button.
And they don't want to do it. And you're asking them to call people all day long.
80 to 100 dials a day.
Yeah, versus you're talking to someone who can't wait to talk to the next person because optimistically and people orientatedly,
My next sale's on the phone.
they're just so happy not only to maybe get the next sale, but also just to see how cool this person is. Like, how different is that when you're hiring? It's just what you talked about with the mastermind example, but if you could apply that same thing to the people so you don't hire your cousin's boyfriend's sister, right? Because that comes in and they probably don't match any of the 3 buckets.
Right.
The only bucket they matched was the availability. And so
that's the Monica Lewinsky model.
Exactly.
Who is available? So you mentioned a Peter principle.
Yep.
So I heard this recently, and this is the idea. I got a sales team. I need a sales manager. The guy's like, oh, no problem. Take one of your best sales guys, give him an override. I was like, whoa. Hang on. Right. Talk about discernment. Like, hey, let me tell you why this is a bad idea. Peter principle, which you just said. And what you alluded to, which I hadn't heard before, is like, once you promoted them to sales manager, they're going to be sales manager everywhere they go. So now they're doomed for failure for the rest of their career. But the way I was able to illustrate and like talk them off this ledge, like, all right, let me ask you this. Would you, Tom Brady, peak of his career, will you take Tom Brady and it's like, hey, you're an excellent quarterback. Let's put you in the quarterback's coach seat. And you're just going to coach the backups. Would you ever do that?
No way.
Why do we do this with salespeople? It's mind-blowing. So, anyway, so I got a chance. So I was in Boston for 2-3 days. I got to hang out with you, and I got to hang out with you a couple more days on a family mastermind in Tampa before the hurricane.
We both barely got out alive.
Yeah. So one thing that I was thoroughly impressed with was anytime someone says, I need help with hiring, they're like, oh, team architects. Any help with hiring? Oh, team architects. It came up over and over and over again. What's team architect?
Yeah, so it's a company that we've started to solve the problem we were just talking about. So in my own, when I talked about what I went through in the first 10 years of business, I was an entrepreneur who was self-employed, who hired a lot of people, right? And that pivot that I learned about bringing the right people in at the right time with the right training became so important that when I saw the second business take off within the first year or two, I realized that was the difference. And Team Architects was really born at that point in time in concept, not as a business, but as a theory that we used to scale a business and escape the day-to-day. And so actually in 2020 in February, so just a little about 4.5 years ago, I was sitting at a boardroom event, and I was talking to the COO, Eddie, who helps Kent Clothier run all those companies. And Eddie and I were talking about like the pandemic was just like, we were in Nashville together. Terrible tornado hit. It was really sad. And we were like, this is terrible. But I think I heard about this little flu bug that might hit America. Yeah. And they're like, they said by April, like a lot of people might get sick. You know, we had no idea it was about ready to happen. But it was funny. We were talking about we're like, well, is this really going to hit? That was the talk in February. And we were like, the real pandemic or the real epidemic is entrepreneurs hiring random people off the street and not knowing how to. And we were talking about, you know how those room awards work at Boardroom. I had just won a room award, and we were talking about why. And part of it was because how quickly this new business took off. And it was the people. People kept asking me, what is it? I got the right butts in the right seats.
Right.
Right. And so that it was born at that point in time. And interestingly enough, I was a PI guy back then too. And I don't have problems with it, but it is a 6-minute test where you just check boxes and boxes, right? And so we set out to try to find a deeper solution, and we realized that PI, DISC, Colby, name all of Myers-Briggs, name all of them. They're usually 4 personality traits.
Yeah.
There's a lot more nuance and detail and personality than that, but they aggregate things. And so we set out to create a better mousetrap. And that's when the TA12 was born. Is we have 8 personality traits, but we incorporated the 4 cognition traits, which for those of you guys listening that don't know what that is, it's really more how you perceive your environment. It's problem solving. It's how well you communicate. It's how creative you are. It's how quickly you learn. None of that has anything to do with personality.
Right.
So I could be an extroverted, assertive person, and the DISC tells me I should be good at sales. But if I'm lousy at solving problems, I don't communicate at a high level, I don't learn quickly, and I'm not creative, I can't use those skills. I go out and a seller in a house can beat me quickly with an objection.
Yeah.
And so we set out to create this better mousetrap, and that's what we did for the next year and a half, was really roll that out. And it was revolutionary I know when you saw it, there's nothing else like that, what we have.
For sure.
And the way that we can get so in depth and take this test, it is 45 minutes, but it's very in depth, but then we can compare it against any job. So we can compare you against any role. And the bigger part was that we have a behavioral sciences company that we have a relationship with, who tells us, hey, give us a job description and we'll create the ideal traits. So we create the unicorn avatar of the best transaction coordinator, of the best acquisition, or the best COO. A candidate gets their 12 traits assessed, and then we overlay them to see how well they fit.
Yeah.
And it was very powerful, but I'll tell you, the back half of where we're at now was after the first year and a half, we saw people still losing. They would make a hire that's like a 99% fit, and we're like 3 months later, the person's gone, and we're like, what happened? We hired a lot of people in that first year and a half. We started exit interviewing everyone that was trying to rehire a position in under 6 months. And we found there was candidate selection, which is what we were really good at helping them do. There was only one of 5 total things. And there was 4 other main issues that were killing them that had nothing to do with placing. In fact, when you place a really good person in, the stakes are really high.
Yeah.
You expect a lot. So it makes everything else harder. And just quickly, without going into a masterclass on this, but the very number one thing, and these all compound on each other, was not having the right job description built. AKA, and I know half of you guys listening to this have done this, I hired a closer, and I didn't have my direct mail wasn't going out yet, so I put him on the dialer to have him prospect. That is 2 different jobs.
Yeah.
Or my transaction coordinator is already looking at all the contracts, so I just had him doing dispo. And we were like listening to what these people were saying, because we're like, walk us through what happened. That was the first biggest issue, is that there was a fuzzy or moving target on what we were looking for. And when it came into focus for a second, we nailed it. They made a great hire, and then the target is moving. So they no longer fit well. So they don't stay. The other couple things, in short, are after you get the right target, which is job descriptions, having that nailed down, then candidate selection is important. Interestingly enough, in the beginning, we thought our test was a silver bullet. I didn't know the 3 categories. It's one of 3 categories. So just because they score 99, if they're
brain.
they're a 19-year-old kid who's never had a job in the corporate world, and they're bad work ethic, terrible core value match. Do not hire that person just because our assessment scored them well.
Right.
Then the next three things, the third thing that was the next cascading issue was onboarding and training, which is obviously with you understand that with the sales training you do. Like, people that are good at hustling and doing something themselves, the better they are at doing it, usually the worse they are at teaching someone else how to do it. It's like why Michael Jordan, as a player, was one of the best players, if not the best player. And as an owner and a GM, he had the worst franchise or worst team, in the league for 20 years.
Yeah.
The last two pieces were interesting too, because then we saw another big drop off with management. So largely when results weren't there, people didn't know how to correct that behavior. And then lastly, this was the least of the issues, but is leadership. Ironically, a lot of entrepreneurs that are visionary can inspire and motivate people. And so this actually propped up some of those other issues where we would help them make a great hire, and they're not a bad leader because they're pretty inspiring because they're excited about what they do. It almost blinded the rest of it. But so we set out over the last few years now, we have a platform. So Team Architects now has assessments for any position that you could ever think of. And if we don't have it, we can make it within 2 days. And it's a subscription-based service where we have unlimited use of all assessments, but also we have training videos, and we have document templates like job descriptions or job ads or 90-day evaluation templates. So we have these HR templates that you need. We have training videos to explain how those work, and we have bi-monthly executive coaching, which is kind of like having a COO on staff. Twice a month, you can check in and get the strategic advice. And there's a customer success team that is almost like a fractional HR support to say, oh, here's the training you need. Here's the document you would use. Here's a 30, 60, 90-day plan for an employee. Go download that, watch the training, and modify it. And so now that we've created this ecosystem of a platform and we have a lot more assessments built out, we've seen such a higher level of success, and all of that is the platform of Team Architects.
Talk to me about the sourcing talent.
Yeah.
Because we just talked about like what Team Architects system is. But when everyone's like, you got to use Steve Richards, right? You got to use Steve. It's because he can get you great talent.
Yep.
Because I think the greatest challenge consistently is how do I get good talent, right?
Yeah.
Like, the thing that drives most business owners crazy, people.
Yeah.
And that was what I heard over and over. They didn't say like the TA12 was the best. TA12 is good. But what's more important is the outcome.
Yeah.
How do I source and keep great talent?
Yep.
What do you do there?
Yeah. So what's interesting, pre-show we were talking about this, how funny it is. I don't think I've talked about this on a podcast before. So this is like a Disruptors exclusive here.
Yeah, we're gonna spill all the tea.
We're gonna let the cat out of the bag at these crazy things, and it's really funny because so largely in the beginning we have the better mousetrap, and we realize, oh, it's really cool, but it's only relative to all the other ways you can screw them. Now we built this whole platform out, shot all these videos, create all these templates, hire a success team, we do all this stuff. We still have people having problems with it. And that whole platform is like a few $100 a month. Like, it can literally change it's everything that will change your business overnight. And people still weren't getting and we're like, what's going on? And we would find like a client who would have access to everything. They'd be like, I don't know how to log into the platform. I lost my login, or I downloaded the assessment. I got everything, but I didn't know how to put the ad on Indeed, or I put my ad on Indeed. I did everything the training told me exactly step-by-step how to place an ad. And then Indeed sent me a thing saying my account was on hold until I verify my employment status. And I didn't have my tax ID, so I called my accountant, and he was on vacation, and we're just like, our minds are melting while we're listening to these excuses. Or I ran an ad and 100 people applied, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, wait. So now the rub is I can't put an ad on Indeed, or I don't want to read 100 resumes. Like, and so, you
solved all the problems, and you found new problems.
Yeah, I think actually, yes, and we're digging to the more root problem.
Yeah, we found the root cause.
The root cause is people just they don't want to take the time to learn it, and they don't want to do it, and they want to buy their time back.
Yeah.
And so we have what's called TA Recruit now, And more than likely, 99% of the clients we come in contact with, we are better at recruiting than them. But largely, it doesn't matter because this one, it costs you a few grand a month to have us find to hire for you. And it's an absolute no-brainer because we will typically go through 200 applicants to find several dozen candidates and then run them through a 7-step process to find 3 of the most qualified candidates, and we'll just book them onto your calendar. Yeah. And the amount of time you save right there, even if we weren't as good at you at recruiting, which I know we are, better than everybody else that's hiring us, just that time savings alone is worth what it costs to do it. And so we realized this is really where it's at, is us being able to give them their time back. Yeah. And ultimately, for me, like I've told you this, my purpose in life is to help, really it's my why is to advance humanity, which I know sounds kind of crazy to some people. Some people put a PowerPoint up and they're like, my why is my family. And I'm like, you're black. Your heart's kind of black if you don't love your kids. But that matters a lot to me. But my why is so big. But my what, because I resonate with business owners, is to help business owners find their way to their best self. Because I know together we'll change the world, which advances humanity. So my level of alignment is to understand, even at the very bottom of this ladder, if I help you make your first good hire that works, frees you up just a little bit. And then the next one and the next one. And after 2 or 3 good hires, you start to have some free time and some free money. And I know you'll go explore yourself like I did. And when you find out who you are, you'll finally circle back to come change, be an Avenger with me. And you want to go change the world. And so, that's the kind of thing I think you're doing with this podcast, to bring so much information to so many people that would change their life. Yeah. Because business owners change their employees' lives, their clients' lives, their vendors, their bankers, right? They have a major influence in the world. And so, what I understand all of this is, yes, there's a cool platform and an industry-leading assessment and all these other things, but you can buy your time back. Yeah. And we're creating freedom, which is what Team Architects does.
Today's show is brought to you by motivatedleads.com. The problem today with many lead sources is that you have to pay for the lead even if it's not any good. So you might be a couple of $1,000s into the month on marketing spend without talking to a quality lead. And the reason why that happens is because Google, the TV station, and the post office can't say for sure which lead that calls you is a motivated seller and which ones aren't. You can't tell Google, hey, this lead isn't any good and I want my money back. With motivatedleads.com, the leads come to you and you can determine for yourself whether the lead is any good. And if it's already listed, a piece of land, a mobile home, or from a wholesaler, you can simply request a refund. One of my biggest pet peeves is when a wholesaler clicks on my PPC ad and asks if he can put me on his buyer's list. With Motivated Leads, you won't have to worry about that anymore. Go to motivatedleads.com, tell them Steve Trang sent you, and get a $300 credit today. Yeah.
And we're creating freedom, which is what Team Architects does.
Yeah. So it's an option. Is it TA recruiting?
TA recruit.
TA recruit. And with that option, well, A, that's your purpose. Clearly is your purpose. Yeah. Which is awesome. So with that, then they can go off and not have to deal with writing the ads, dealing with LinkedIn, creating a LinkedIn profile, reviewing 100 resumes. Because I can say for sure, because I've been in this journey for a long time, there was a part of my journey where I was going blind on resumes. And a lot of my colleagues were too. We got a couple hundred resumes. What do? I still remember, like, clicking through, like, their Facebook profiles, right? Their LinkedIn. And then at this time, man, this is a long time ago. I think, like, find them on MySpace, whatever. Different time in my career, yeah. Right? But, like, it's a lot to go through all that. So to be able to outsource that, I think, is huge. And then on top of that, you have a different discernment because you have 50,000 applicants that have come through. You can see fairly quickly, is this person worth even an interview or not? And I could say also, like, I used to do a lot of in-person interviews. I don't know. I just had a hard time. Someone comes in, it's a crappy interview. I was like, it's gonna go nowhere. Like, do I just like kick him out after 3 minutes? Right? I was like, oh, they drove all the way here. Let's just like phone in this interview. And like after 30 minutes, they know they didn't get the job, but you didn't want them to feel bad. Yeah. So
it's
what a waste of time. And so I think for what you're doing as a steal, I'm definitely going to be using you guys for that. I'm looking forward to using you guys for that. And I just want to real quick, I wrote this down. Jordan, not a great coach, right? Best player, I argue, in the history of the game. Not a great coach, not a great manager.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard some of the nightmare stories from him?
Yeah.
Right? That just goes to show you, Peter principle, just because you're good at it doesn't mean you're great at managing. I mean, like, he destroyed Kwame Brown's, like, mindset. And then what was it?
Randy Brown, too.
Randy Brown?
There was a couple guards that got drafted that were supposed to be really good that no one ever heard of because they never, out of rookie camp, they never even saw the floor because their psyche was just crushed.
And I remember one year, it was like, and I think this was recorded. If not, it was just quoted. But it's like, you guys think you're the 72-10 Bulls? You guys can just turn it on and turn it off. We were the 72-10 Bulls. We couldn't turn it off. And you, soft, blah, 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 lots of profanity. You guys can do this. It's a different management style.
Yep, 100%. Right. You know what's interesting, too, something just came to mind while you were talking is, I will actually say, you said just because you're good at doing it doesn't mean that you can manage it or run it. Mm-hmm. I'll actually go a step further and say, if you are really good at doing it, mm-hmm. you probably are bad at running it, managing it. It's almost connected. Mm-hmm. And so our clients who struggle the most are the ones that are the best hustlers, mm-hmm. that are slinging deals, and they don't think anybody can do it like them. So it's great hubris to think that no one is, do you think Jeff Bezos is sitting around thinking like nobody can pull a box off a shelf and drive a forklift as good as me? He doesn't care, like literally. And so a lot of people come through and they take the assessment and then they're killing it in their business, and they take our assessment and they score like a 9 at all these positions, and they're like, but I'm doing them day in and day out. But largely you're unemployable. We're not trying to find another you who's a Superman that can, even when you're not naturally gifted to do something, you can make it happen because of your core values and work ethic and all these other things. Not to mention when you're the one putting the money in your pocket, it's a lot easier to do stuff you don't want to do. And when you hire someone and they just get a paycheck, it's easier for them to be like, I don't want to do this. But I would just challenge all of you guys to pay attention to this. And so if you are a one-man show, if you haven't assessed yourself in each position, just realize this. Somebody might be listening to this saying, well, I'm not really ready to hire yet. Well, if you're doing any activity, not even closing deals, if you're making calls and doing anything, I got news for you. You've already made your first hire. Mm. In fact, you hired yourself to do all the positions, and it was the worst hire you're ever going to make. Yeah. Because not that you're not good at any one of those, but the reality is you just hired yourself to do everything in the business. Now, financially, I understand you might not be ready, but the reality is you can't afford not to hire. Even if it's an assistant or a COO, I don't really care. The KPIs will tell you if I'm here with this activity and I want to be here. I'm sure you've covered this on other episodes. It's just reverse engineering where you want to be, start with the end in mind, and you reverse back to where you are and you project forward and say, where am I going to not have enough time to get everything done?
Yeah. Could you, if you're a one-man show, pick the TA12 and figure out who your next hire should be?
100%. But I will caution that the business needs come first. So it does matter what you're good at, what you like, and what you're not good at, what you don't like. But even in the face of that, like we've had people do this a lot where they're like hiring an acquisition person and they're like, I just think they'd be better at dispo. And they run them against the dispositions report and they score very highly, but their business doesn't need a dispo person right now. Mm-hmm. So don't hire just because somebody's a good fit. It's not the only reason you make a decision, but I will say this, it's a huge part of it. To say, once I run this against myself, if you were on our platform, you could take the assessment once, score yourself against all the roles, see where your strengths and weaknesses lie. Even if you weren't using that to know who to hire, you would know how to be better at your job. And so all that we've talked about today is like using this for hiring. But what's more important is once you make the hire, these assessments show you the traits for 2 reasons. They can help in management and training. One of them is how to squeeze more juice out of that person because you see where their personality traits are. Mm-hmm. But also you can look at yours and theirs and how you compare to each other to understand how to have a better relationship with each of the people within your organization.
One of the things that really surprised me, I can't remember which one of the 12 it was, but it was had to do with communication and words. I think it had to do with the shapes. I think that's what.
Okay.
The way we can see shapes and rotate them through space. And you said that meant I could communicate better, or was
You're combining a couple of the shapes with spatial visualization.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most commonly like misunderstood one on the test for people that are low
I know
in
you
it.
had to go slow with me on that one.
No, you scored. I think you scored well, didn't you?
I scored well on that part. I'm saying you had to slow it down and explain to me what it was.
Yeah. It's really creativity. So if you think about it, when I see 3-dimensional shapes, so a lot of people see a problem and they see it for face value. Like a great example is there's a lien on a property that you're wholesaling. No one knew about it till the end. And it's like 10 grand. And you're thinking, well, the seller already went as low as they could. The buyer went as high as they could. Neither one's going to want to pay it. I'm going to have to pay it. And like in your mind at face value, one of us has to pay it or we're splitting it somehow or whatever, and you're kind of done. But if you have depth, 3-dimensional, like if you can turn it upside down, turn it around, and like creativity in a way, but it's not artistic creativity. It's like outside the box thinking. I could say, why does anyone have to pay it? How old? If it's a 10-year-old credit card, charge off, let's just get it discounted.
Right.
No one has to pay it. But without that creativity, which is depth, right? So yeah, you can see shapes. Ironically, it's also like people might be clumsy. They bump doorways or trip on things. Their spatial visualization is low. But that also has to do with when they see things at face value in the world, they don't see the depth behind it too. And so that's one of the sneaky traits that we've put in. When I look at that, if anyone's low in that, they cannot be in a position where it's going to require discernment to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Because they'll struggle with it.
That's funny you said that they're clumsy, because I would think that clumsy people, the ones I think of, are not the most creative thinkers when it comes to problem solving. So it's funny you bring that up. But yeah, like that's the thing that the strength I've always brought, and I think that's the reason why our sales training is so effective. Is like, yeah, this is what they said. Well, here's what you say to that. Here's how you overcome that, right?
Yeah.
Or you talk about like, well, how old is the lien? IRS lien? Is it a credit card? Right? Like we had one that we had a deal that we just did. I posted about it. I haven't shared how I did it. Got a bunch of people asking how I did it. I was like, that's another video. But like they had a $200K Medicaid lien, they had a 40-something thousand solar lien, and they had a $5,000 credit card lien. And we got them all removed so that we could close. Right? And they're like, how did you do it? I was like, just did it. Right?
Yeah.
One of them, which is cool, is, you play basketball with certain friends who've got connections. Like, hey, I'm dealing with this problem. Can you help me out? You know anyone at this company? He's like, oh, I'm friends with the CEO and CFO. Put in a good word for me, right? That's the way you solve a problem.
Yep.
But we could have just given up. It's like, oh, feels dead.
You know what's interesting with that is, just really quickly to add, the opposite's true as well. If you have an administrative assistant who's just supposed to do what they're told, and they're extremely like creative, and they're thinking of new ways all the time to do everything, and you're like, no, just do what I said. So our greatest strengths in the wrong butt in the wrong seat become huge weaknesses, or even
this is why I'm unemployable.
Yeah, my creativity is like, it's way all the way up, and so is my logical problem solving. So I can logically think through. But when I got involved in deal sessions, we would be holding on to deals that we have. It's such a colossal waste of time because I'm 17 loops deep because I can figure it out. I'm like, no, I can. They're like, I don't remember where we started. I'm like, I do. I remember all 17 loops, but now it's a waste of time. And we're like, we just spent an hour talking about this, and we could have called 3 more sellers and got another contract.
And we squeezed out $3K on that deal.
Yeah.
Because when we get that creative, sometimes all we're getting is like the bottom of the barrel. So what was the other one as far as communication, one I was thinking of?
So that one's an interesting one. It's called vocabulary.
Okay.
And so it does test. People complain about that when they take the test, but they're like, I didn't know any of the words. But it does have to do with like roots of words and structures of words, and like, does it look like a word I know? But when we test vocabulary, it's not just that you know a bunch of cool words. This is where it really relates to like mattering in the business is, how many times there's multiple words that mean the same thing, but they all carry like a slightly different connotation.
Yeah.
And so if I have a bigger vocabulary, I can be more effective and granular with my communication, my outbound communication.
Right.
So I'll pick and choose from a bigger repertoire of words. I just used one of them right there.
Good.
But also communication is inbound as well. It's when I'm listening and learning. And so I can read between the lines better.
Yeah.
And I can hear better than I'm listening to you, but I'm also hearing what you're saying because I'm like, oh. And we find that people who have larger vocabularies are also better at nonverbal communication with understanding body language and things like that.
Yeah.
And so if someone has a big vocabulary, it directly correlates to how effective they'll communicate with people and how quickly they'll learn. And so when I need an employee to learn quickly, and it's not just learning the upfront training, but it's like machine learning. It's like being out in the field and getting the reps in and picking up the nuance, which acquisitions is a great one to understand that. But if you're in leadership, we can't have anyone in leadership that doesn't have a high vocabulary.
Right. Because you were saying it affects communication, and that's something that we lean very, very heavily on inside our sales training, is that I need to fully understand, to the best of my abilities, what it is you're trying to tell me, and take it at face value. I got to do my absolute best to understand what you're trying to tell me. And on top of that, when I'm trying to talk to you, I got to do my absolute best that whatever I say lands as best as possible. If we're off and it lands poorly, deal can die really fast.
Yeah.
Right. So communication, leadership is so paramount. And I have a note here talking about mindset. You mentioned we got to make sure we talk about mindset, I believe. Remember what this was in context to? Or is it just one of those things where you and I had shiny object syndrome?
I think we've kind of covered it a little bit. I just think I wanted to make sure that we talked about it. And it's just everybody gets lost in this business.
Yeah.
Right. When they get going and they get stuck in the X's and O's and the dollar signs. But if I recall when you and I were like prepping and we're like, let's make sure we talk about this. This is something I just feel passionate about personally bringing up, because even if you use team architects and you can hire better, or you use any of the things they learn here, all the tactics and vendors and all these things come to you. But if you're not in alignment with who you're supposed to be, you're going to be you're in an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Right. It's what I did in the first 10 years. I built a business that I didn't want. Right. And the better you are at pushing through, when I look back, I had so many signs to get out. Literally, like, I just got so good at bobbing and weaving and keeping jumping over things and blowing through brick walls. And like, you kind of becomes your thing, and you're like, nothing can stop me. And you're just like a freight train going down, and the light at the end of the tunnel is another train coming. It's not the other side of the mountain. And so I just think it's worth putting in here. I want everyone to understand this concept, because most people fail to grasp what they really want. They're running away from something instead of towards something. And if you don't know who you are, it's almost impossible to figure out what you want. And every new thing sounds cool. You don't quite feel what you're doing is right.
Yeah.
But if you can find out who you are first, which is like, what's the best version of me, and what would that person do? And also look at the worst version of me. When I'm at my worst, what does that mean? Right. And so that's why when I was, literally studying all these philosophies and all these different religions and counseling and therapy and Enneagram and every psych test I've taken every single one of them. I took all the testing for autism and like ADHD. Like I studied the psyche, the human psyche. And I can tell you that if you can go down and figure out when you're at your worst and what your potential is at your best, you can get 2 data points. So you can get a line between the two, because without it, you can't. Without 2 points, you can't have a line. Yeah. That's what creates alignment. And I feel whenever I get a platform, I like to bring this up, because spend as much time as you can. It's not, most of your time needs to be spent making money and doing things right. But if you forget about this part, you'll wake up one day 10 years in and have to go through a life blowing up session, which many of us do. But it's like, oh, at the time it was terrible, but now I look back, it was the best thing that could have ever happened. But if you can learn the idea of alignment before this, it might not be as fast and sexy, and it doesn't look as cool as what you see on, your buddy at the mastermind's doing or whatever. Yeah. But slow and steady will win the race. And because when you're in alignment, there's natural momentum in the universe creating flow. This is when we feel flow state. Yeah. Right. And so I think that's why I told you we should touch on that, because
this is along the lines of how to be happy and successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the better you are at something that isn't in alignment, the worse you feel. How many rich people do you know aren't happy?
Surprisingly, I don't know that many.
Because you hang out in the masterminds. In the real world.
In the real world, yes.
It's most of them.
I hang out with the people that opt to be there.
Okay, how many wealthy people who are happy but they're fat They're probably going to have diabetes or
A lot. And there are a lot of them in Washington, D.C. But yes, there are a lot of
or they're married, they're divorced,
yeah.
or their kids are like not
That's
connected.
the absolute worst. Hearing how many people are. I've heard multiple stories, where like they did everything in their mind for their family, and then at the end, their family's like, "I want nothing to do."
Yeah, or when someone dies, the family business is inherited. Those kids resent that business because it kept their parents away from them.
Yeah.
Create a lot of stress in their parents' life. But the reason we brought that up, I think we wanted to touch on it, was just none of this business success matters if you're not happy, and you don't get success and money and then become happy. Everybody says it seems cliche, but being almost 50 and I'm in I'm gonna call it the mid back end of things, not the back end, because I feel like I'm gonna live to 100 with all the health and biohacking stuff I do. But my perspective now, looking back on it, is you really do take ownership for where you are, and when you have radical ownership of like, look, I'm just the sum of all the decisions I made and the hand I was dealt, like, and I'm taking ownership over that, right? You can become grateful for whatever you've done and whatever you've learned, and for the opportunity to change tomorrow. You can do something completely different. So if I can be, radical ownership of where I'm at, which makes me content. People mistake content and satisfied all the time. I don't think you can be happy unless you're content and dissatisfied. And I'll say this a different way. If you're discontent, meaning like that business partner left or ripped me off, or I shouldn't have done this, or the market screwed me, and if you're feeling that's discontent, but that's looking back.
Mm-hmm.
I need to have grace looking back and ownership and say, look, I did the best I could and everything else was a learning lesson, and I am where I am. So I'm content with being where I am, but I'm unsatisfied with staying here. And satisfied is looking forward. Because when you're satisfied, you start coasting.
Yeah.
And so happiness to me is less about the actual material success you have, and it's more about being content looking back and dissatisfied looking forward, and grace looking back and accountability looking forward, right? And that's also the as above, so below kind of for the deep philosophical people on here, but it's also what I said about looking at the best version of me that could be in the future, and looking at the worst of me in the past, my problems and what's happened, and reconciling the two so I can actually move forward. And so I know we wanted to cover real estate and my story and team architects, and you can't scale a business without doing something to create the right team.
Yeah.
You will never instinctively and naturally create a team on your own. You will never build the right team on your own. It's not naturally human to know how to discern the decisions and all the things. And we've built team architects largely to help people with that. And again, with our platform being where it's priced and how cheap it is for us, we're a fraction of a recruiting. All that it's a no-brainer if you're trying to hire or figure things out. But none of it matters outside of being happy and in alignment.
Right.
And so if you can work on that, it's really easy to put all these other things that you teach people every week into play, and they can really create change in their life.
Yeah. And I think it's absolutely profound, philosophical. We don't really talk about it a lot, right? But be content with the past, but dissatisfied with the present so that you can have a brighter future, right? Like, because there's so many people that mistake, you were saying, I'll be happy when I get there. And all the people that say, I'll be happy when I get there are freaking miserable.
Yeah.
They're miserable because they're mistaken that the results determine your happiness, whereas the journey, right? And it sounds maybe kind of like hippie-ish, right? But the reality is the happiest people I know are the ones that have looked back and like they made some mistakes, made a lot of mistakes, but they don't regret it. And they're looking forward. I remember someone was like, we held a live event. It was myself, Ryan Pineda, Kong Lee, and Sam Prim. And this girl, she asked the questions like, why don't you guys ever show your failures? Like you guys only show the good stuff. It's like, why don't you ever show your failures? Your regrets. I was like, forget them pretty fast. Right? Like, because I don't dwell on them. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so when they asked, like, what's your biggest regret, your failures? Like, I have plenty. But man, I take my lesson and then the rest of it is blacked out. I take the good from it and the rest is just, it's compartmentalized. It's gone.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's incredibly profound. And then we're doing something. We're going to be doing a masterclass. So we're going to post a URL in the notes, in the show notes. I'm going to put a QR code on the screen. What do you have in mind for the masterclass?
Yeah, just to catch everybody up listening, you and I were talking about what we can do here. And I feel like now that we're 10 days into basically hanging out with each other in 3 different states.
Yeah. So it was Friday and Saturday in Boston, right? And then it was Monday and Tuesday in Tampa, and then we're stuck here again today.
Yeah, stuck. I like that.
And we had a pretty late night, I think, on Monday night.
I had one.
I was saying where you and I were maybe it was Sunday night, but there was a lot of BSing around the table.
You basically came to me and you're like, look, I
love
boardroom.
The word choice wasn't the best. In hindsight, when you point out, the word choice was not the best.
Well, I'm not going to say that, but I'm just going to say basically what you said was, he came up and said to me, so everyone listening knows, he's like, listen, I just got into boardroom with you. I really want to work with all these people. But basically, like, I love team architects, and I realize, like, I have to figure out how to marry the two because everyone that's working with me is going to be using team architects.
Right.
It's like, what Kool-Aid did you spike for everyone in here? And so it really does. This is no hyperbole. It does have a brand. The brand is incredible in boardroom. I mean, especially it's insane because they've been around from the beginning to see what it does. But because of that conversation and hanging around more and knowing that we're going to work together more, I felt like, and what you and I talked about was a good idea would be is to marry up to understand how to really supercharge sales in your business. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to hire an acquisition right now or you're doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If we can take some of the best sales training to make the most out of a person, whether it's you or someone you're hiring, and also talk about how to build that role, manage, train, and lead it. And we'll also cover some of the recruiting pieces of it, but it's more about how to do the HR and team building side of it along with the training piece. They fit so nicely together that we have at least a 1-part, maybe a 2-part masterclass that we'll just do for free for anyone that that buys into Team Architects. When you sign up through the Disruptors network or through this podcast, we'll make that masterclass available to them.
Yeah, and I think it's great, right? And an additional bonus because, again, like while I was there, it was pretty clear, right? Like Steve is hottest girl at the club, so I better get to know that girl.
And the funny thing is, helping run boardroom, being on the board and a leader there, and also with family, being on the commission there, you saw the difference. Everyone's talking about Team Architects. I'm related to Team Architects at boardroom, and then we went to family. No one even knows what I do, but I'm the mushroom ayahuasca guy that everybody gets to their deepest feelings with, and they wonder if I have a job. It's like you saw both sides of. So we just, largely I haven't taken this brand out, and so it's exciting to be on the podcast to talk to you about it because it really is. I think we're wrapping here. I'll say this. If you are hiring or building teams without using something like this, whether it's Team Architects or not, you are literally flying blind.
Yeah.
It is literally the most colossal, typical mistake for a business owner that will set you back years to every time you bring the wrong person on, it's not just the hard cost, it's the opportunity cost and the stress. And if you're going to hire and you think you only deserve, again, some random person that's, from church or your neighbor's wife or whatever, just realize when you hire someone and bring them into where you are because they fit where you are, they are locking you into where you are. And if you can hire the right person, hire above, who's already been there, done that, they know what they're doing, they will actually pull you forward. So it's the difference between friction and momentum. And that's a 7-figure difference annually for most businesses.
Yeah, I would say, speaking from a person who's made hiring mistakes, right? The cost of a wrong hire is not the wages. It's the lost sales. It's the damage to the brand, right? Like that guy stands for your company. Boy, what I thought of you and your company, and after this experience, is drastically different, right? And like brand, maybe the brand doesn't matter for some of you guys listening, but I can say for sure my brand matters. And like some of the emails I've gotten, it's like, what did I do in making this wrong hire?
Absolutely. You know, when in our transactional business we have bought so many houses where we offered less than other people because they trusted us.
Yeah.
Because of our people.
Right.
Because we instilled whatever made us special. We were able to build a team with the right people and that's how you can actually exit a business.
Yeah.
Is to instill embody the best parts of you into them so that you're basically operating while you're not around. That is there is no other way to scale a business. There's a bunch of ways to grow a business. There is no way to scale a business without people involved in it.
I appreciate you bringing that up because I was going to say that earlier. I forgot about it. What is the distinction between growth and scale in your words?
Yeah, so growth is linear. So I work X amount of units harder, I spend X amount of dollars, and I get X amount of growth, right? It's linear. And so every time there's two things when I'm growing. One is there is no exponential, there's no curve, there's no leverage. Usually you work harder to grow more, right? And so every dollar you get comes at the expense of a certain amount of time and cost, right? The other thing is growing has pains associated, and I don't care if you're a person or a business. When something grows, it hurts. Like we talked about, you said at the very beginning, you and I sat and watched John Maxwell. It was one of the best,
incredible presentation
I've seen in years.
Yeah.
For him to talk about learning from failure, we all know that. And then when you listen to someone like that talk about it, and he said one of the things that sets him apart from everyone else is that he's willing to fail way more than them. He'll fail 100 times more than you will. And yeah, it sucks when it's happening, but after a year of that, he's so far ahead of you, never look back, right? And so growing pains are failures, and so we can learn from them, but that doesn't mean they don't hurt, because two things can be true at once. Scale is just a leverage that would amplify your results. So we can scale a broken business, and so your revenue will go up, but so do all your problems. Everything is magnified, so 1 + 1 = 3. So that's cool. Sometimes if you're good at it, 1 + 1 = 10. But the problem is if you don't work the kinks out of it before you scale, which is what's happening in almost every mastermind around the country, is everyone's learning to scale before they learn how to grow. They're putting gas on not only their revenue, but they're putting it on all their problems that they don't know they have. And the problem isn't the problems you know you have. The real problems are the ones you don't know that you have. And when you scale, those are the unintended consequences of the complex system that you're like, usually is a lagging indicator that you don't understand it while it's happening. And you look in your P&L and you're like, what? We just had the biggest month ever. Why is there nothing left over to pay myself this month? And almost everyone I know that gets into the multiple, when they hit the 7-figure and then they go they break to the 1 and into the 2 and they're in that range, most of them are making less money then than they were back when they were at $500,000.
Yeah. Wild.
It's almost all of them.
Almost all.
Because
almost
you're
every time.
investing in growth, which doesn't always have a return because you're fixing problems.
Right.
But later, when you invest in scale, you get multiples back. It's compounding versus investing in growth is just making your problems go away. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Well, this was for everyone. It wasn't for me.
Oh, you already know. I know you know.
I already knew. So I think, scale was such a big word. Like 2020, 22, until the interest rate hikes. And a lot of the guys are talking about scaling. A chunk of them are no longer in business because they scaled their problems. Like one of the things I have always hated is like I hired all these salespeople or VAs to hit the phones because I didn't want to. That's not the first thing to scale. That's not the first thing.
Yeah.
Other things first, right? So I want to wrap it up asking this question. Is you've been coaching now for 25 years. Long time. What are some of the biggest ahas, lessons, or whatever that you took from that people can either A, learn from and benefit from, or B, avoid? You spent countless weeks going back and forth with a homeowner only to lose a deal because the seller changed their mind, another wholesaler made an unreasonable offer, or what the seller needs from the sale, you just can't pay. Now imagine you've got the ultimate control on a property that you just locked up, meaning you're on title and every decision has to go through you, eliminating virtually every external threat. That's why the installment method was created. Through installment payments, you have full control of the property as your name is now on the title. Any decision the seller wants to make now has to be approved by you. No longer can they pull out equity, go with another buyer, or change their mind. Imagine combining the best of creative finance with the flexibility of marketing the property on the MLS to collect the most amount of revenue possible, all while having total control of the property. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The concept here is simple, but implementing is challenging. So visit wholesale2024.com to learn more so that you'll never have another deal blow up.
Great question. I've already talked about the number one biggest one, which is alignment.
Yeah.
Alignment trumps everything. So I've got a model that I work with people that I coach, and it has all these steps in how to manifest, whether you're trying to lose weight, fix your marriage, be a better dad, grow your revenue. It doesn't matter. It applies to everything. The very top of that is alignment every time. Because if you miss that piece, what I talked about with the 2 points of knowing where the best version of you is in the future, but being honest with where you are, knowing this part of you, the current location. This is interesting because a lot of people that you'll go to seminars and they'll talk about, hey, the GPS analogy where you got to have an exact destination, get really clear on exactly where you want to go. I don't disagree with that to some degree. But actually, like I live in Indiana. If I want to go to Florida, I don't need an address. I can drive for like 15 to 17 hours before I need to know where I'm going because it's the same. I generally know where I'm headed. But if I don't put my current location in my GPS, it can't tell me the first turn to make.
Right.
This is why big companies pay PricewaterhouseCoopers to come in and audit them. You can't audit yourself, clearly. And so like one of the biggest things I've learned in business is this idea of alignment trumps everything, because without it, the better you are at manifesting without alignment, the faster you're going to get shit you don't want, right? And then you get down a path further and it's harder to come back. And so if I can give anybody advice out there, it's you got to get an outside perspective, but when I have a new client come on, I always start with an audit and a full assessment of them and everyone on their team and an audit of everything. Get really clear on where you're at, and almost everybody's goals are based on something that they're more about what they're running away from than what they're running towards.
Yeah.
So all those concepts will really help you with alignment. That's probably one of the biggest thing. And I'll give you guys one other thing. If you don't understand KPIs, you are stacking the deck so bad against yourself. And it's not like, don't download the sheet that someone gave you from the coaching program and plug numbers in and think you've got to understand the process, like understand what it is, right? You don't want to give someone a fish. Every time someone's like, download my KPI guide, I hate it because I'm like, everyone's going to just dump numbers in and think they did something. And everyone's like, I want Plecto to sit on top of this and automatically go high level and automatically bloop, bloop, bloop. And I'm like, no, use a damn notepad and a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Almost every company that I work with that's in the high multiple 7 or 8 figure, there's 2 or 3 people that at the end of the day conglomerate everything and they're working out of a Excel, making that final dashboard. And so I'll give you guys this right now. What I mean by that, and this is just some tangible, like practical takeaway, is learn about leading indicators, which are activities that drive lagging indicators, which are results. The real power in that, the activities are indicative of success and they're also controllable. At the very beginning, they're very controllable. I can control putting direct mail out. That's not very indicative of a deal.
Yeah.
We're talking about real estate. Further down the process, as I get closer to a deal, getting a contract is very indicative of getting a deal. Like having a contract signed. It's not very controllable.
Right.
But somewhere in the middle, making an offer is somewhat controllable and somewhat indicative. That's leading indicators. Those are activities I care about, is where they're kind of in that somewhat controllable, somewhat indicative. The lagging results are the ones that matter most. It usually has to do with deals, money, things that happen. The real magic, though, is twofold after that. When I divide the 2 numbers into each other, the activity and the result, and I get a percentage, like how many offers get accepted, how many leads that come in are qualified, what percent of deals fall out that don't close. Those percentages are way easier to manage your business to. It's where you go from being reactive to proactive. and you want to compare where you're at against where you want to be. So I know it's hard on the podcast to get in these layers, but the first layer is tracking the activities and the results. The second layer is dividing them into each other. And the third layer is comparing goal versus actual. That's literally the best practical advice I can give anyone in a business, where you can get to a proactive dashboard to make decisions. Because otherwise you just have a spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers in it.
That don't have meaning.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
you say doing it by hand or spreadsheet personally will attach a lot more meaning. Meaning becomes understanding. With understanding, now you have actionable intel.
yeah, and after 3 months of knowing that every number is completely accurate and tracked properly and you're doing all the math, then you can pay some VA to dump it all into Plecto and make all the pretty cool stuff. Right. Automate it, whatever. But you need to go through that process. And so if I can impart two things, and we could run 20 hours of podcast on this easily, if you can work on that alignment piece I talked about personally, and then learn how to read, to track and process, not just track, but process, like I said, through these ratios, numbers, now I don't care what business literally, you can do anything now.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've recently taken over my own marketing, and then even more recently, offloaded it again. But there was a period of time where I had major trust issues because I thought every agency was crap. And so I started doing everything myself.
They're not?
I found a good one.
Okay.
I found a good one. It helps when your coach is coaching.
Okay.
Right. And so in that process, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to figure out the metrics myself. And so I'm over in Facebook, and I'm exporting the results. I'm looking at the cost per lead, and then like the from how many people I clicked on the ad, and then from the people that clicked on the ad, how many people clicked on the link, went to the website, how long were they on the website, and how long they were on the website, to how many submitted their email, and submitted their email to actually bought the product, right? And then bought the product. Did they watch the VSL afterwards? Right? Like, did they pay for the upgrade? Right? All these other things. I didn't understand this at all. And so I was like, I have to understand this before I outsource it again, because every time I've outsourced it without understanding it, it's never worked.
Yeah.
Now that I understand it, now I outsource it, I have metrics I can hold them accountable to.
Yeah, you can manage your vendors now.
Yeah. Whereas before I was like, hey, what's going on? I don't have any leads. And they're like, oh, just put more money into it. Or we're just waiting on this.
They're like, it went from 1.2 to 2.5. You're like, well, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, sounds great.
What are we talking about? It doubled.
Yeah. But your point about the exercise.
Yeah.
Once you do it manually, you can attach meaning to it. With meaning comes understanding. With understanding comes, now you can see the patterns. You can see the, hey, if we do this and this happens, and if then, and all the correlation and causation.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell
all
you.
All that nerdy stuff.
100%. And I'll tell you guys this, just to kind of add some color to that. Having things work in your business is cool. Like making money and feeling like it's working. But it's a really bad place to be doing 100 things and not know which ones are working and which ones aren't.
You got the PT Barnum business.
Yeah. And so the second best place you can be than making money is to know exactly what's wrong. You can sleep at night, even if your business is sucking right now, but you have all the information, which requires accurate collection, and then math, and then comparison, and then perspective, and you layer all that into it. And yes, you're scared and worried and all these things, but you go to bed feeling like you actually have your arms around it. And when in 2021, when everyone's printing money in real estate, wholesaling especially, those guys should have been scared shitless, because they don't know what's working and what's not. They have no idea. They found out because the market didn't cause as much of the problem as they think. When it shifted, it just exposed all the problems that existed.
That they got away with. Yeah,
they were getting away with it because the gains in the market were covering up the flaws. They counterbalanced it. And when the equity, when the REITs came out and the interest rates, that just shifted all the margin out, because there wasn't inflated pricing and there was expensive money. The margins squeezed out, and wholesalers operate on margin. And then after that, the only way you can make money at that point is by being really good at negotiating and being really good at marketing. And like all those things take attention to detail.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you don't have all the numbers to know, right?
Yeah.
I feel sorry for every marketing vendor in the country in mid 2022, I guarantee they all got hit by a Mack truck
Yeah.
with clients leaving them because they're like, wait, I'm not making money anymore.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So guys, hope you guys got a ton of value. I want you to think about some last thoughts you want to leave all the listeners with. Again, guys, we're going to be doing a masterclass together. So look for the QR code, look for the URL in the show notes. And again, if you guys got value today, I think Steve brought a ton of value. Make sure you hit that share button. Leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify. I think. What are some last thoughts you want to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I'll just say this. I'll take the second to talk more personally like I did before and just reiterate that I really do feel like business owners are here to change the world. And we create value in exchange for income, and that income an entrepreneur might just be putting in their pocket, right? Or a self-employed person, but a business owner is taking that money and they're investing in the team and the people and the product, and they're improving. And so I can't think of a better way than, to be on platforms like this or own company or my coaching business or the team architects or the masterminds we're a part of. All of that stuff is supporting this entrepreneurial business owner community. And it's the shift from being a hustler and entrepreneur that's reactive, right? And they're working for their business. You can shift into being a business owner and actually have a business that works for you rather than you working for it. It will free things up for you to go out and change the world. And so I'm just happy to be in here talking to you about this, and anyone that has interest in connecting in any way. If anything I said, especially, I hope Team Architects has great sales, but honestly, if anybody just DMs me on Facebook and says, dude, I resonate with what you were saying about being a better person and changing the world, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Right. So I appreciate the platform.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.
Steve Trang. Jump on the Steve Trang. Disruptors.